The Christian Association for Survivors of Suicide Loss is pleased to present our podcast, Reaching for Hope with Joy Osborne. Let's join Joy and her guests as they discuss topics of relevance for emotional and spiritual wellness.
Welcome, listeners, to our podcast. I have Beth and Kelsey with me today, and we're going to be discussing the topic of anxiety. I want to talk a little bit about anxiety because I know it's real prevalent and common, and I have experienced it, and I wanted to get your input on, have you experienced anxiety? And if so, how did you handle your anxiety? Because I know that a lot of people, especially as Christians, some people think we don't go through things or we keep it quiet. And I think people want to hear, what did we experience and how did we handle that? So anybody want to share anything about your experience?
I will, Joy, to be honest. And like you said, I think as Christians, they think that we see life with rose-colored glasses and everything's perfect. Mm-hmm. Well, to be honest, we're just real. We're real people with real problems, but we have Jesus is the higher power to make us feel, to get us through. And myself personally, I spent 28 years in a big box retailer. I started working while I was in high school, and I had aspirations of going to college, and this was the part-time job. But I just stayed for 28 years. And when I finally decided to leave, I had the most anxiety that I'd experienced in a long time.
Wow.
It was overwhelming to leave a job, to leave everything you've known. Right. My husband would say, they get the best of you and we get the rest of you.
Oh, wow.
So, leaving was like, okay, here I am, I'm leaving. But I went into a real culture shock. I had depression, anxiety. What am I going to do next? It's the fear of failure, that this was all I was ever going to be. I didn't see myself beyond the job.
Like identity.
Identity. So when I did leave, I spent about 6 to 8 months with a therapist, and she said everything's situational, and that made the difference for me. Right. It wasn't do or die, so to speak. Everything's situational. Everything can change. Everything. It was, to pawn the phrase, she said it. She called the big box retailer like Darth Vader.
Okay.
She's like, you're cutting it all off and starting new. And it made the difference for me to realize that this is all situational. Everything can change, and that I have to focus on new things, not the past. Go forward, not backward.
That's good. It's in the Bible as well. Emma said, putting things behind, we look forward. That's good. Such wisdom she gave you, and it worked.
It did. I had to think about things differently, the way I looked at things, as human beings. We're forward-thinking people. Our eyes are forward, our feet, hands, we all go forward. So go forward, don't look backward.
Right.
And
well, that's good, because as a Christian, many people don't think they need to go to doctors, that, if you have enough faith, you can get through. And yes, I believe faith does help us, and it has helped me. But sometimes God has us go and get help from other people that he has gifted them in those areas. I'm always reminded of Luke in the Bible. He was a physician, right? He had that gift. And other people went to him. We don't see the Bible saying that only pray and that's all, right? He gives us people. So I'm so grateful for you sharing that you went to a counselor and it did help.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we need somebody outside our problem. Somebody who's not in the middle of it, somebody who can give a perspective that doesn't involve the other people around you. Because we're always worried. I mean, I know me, I'm worried about how's it going to affect my family? How's it going to affect my loved ones? And she really put the focus back to me and made me do the work and made me look at me.
Yeah, and I think with women, because women are the ones that experience anxiety more than men. And I think it's because the very thing you're saying, one reason being that we think we have to keep it all together. We have to be the one to figure things out. Sort of like an example I use is the nurturing part. We have to fix it. We have to somehow make sure everything flows well, or it's not going to happen. So I understand. And
I think you can easily get into an anxiety spiral when you're thinking of all those different things, because you're already anxious But then you're thinking of how that's going to affect every other part of your life, and you can just start spiraling and spiraling into that.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Right.
What nurtures by nature.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So when
That's
you're
good. I know for me, I have had anxiety throughout my life. Now, anxiety is normal. I mean, this is a way God has us protect ourselves too, that there might be a fight or flight or something going on, right? But when it gets to the point where it's excessive, like you can't sleep, you're worrying so much that you can't focus. I ran into that a few times in my life, to the point also that a part of anxiety, I had panic attacks. And for me, I remember them like they were yesterday. I thought I was going to die. My heart was racing. I was like, and one of them was in a dentist chair. Okay, so I'm sitting there in a dentist chair. Nothing against dentists. It's just I was having a moment, and I was by myself, and I didn't know what was going on. And I'm like sweating, and I'm looking around. My eyes, I'm like, because they had just done a procedure, and actually the laughing gas didn't help me any. Okay, just saying. And so they come running in and they're like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And all of a sudden they started putting packs on my cold packs all over me, and I had to calm down. But I never knew what that was until they were explaining to me that I was like stressing, I guess. I'm already not a dentist teeth fan because it hurts. Okay, just saying. All right, for me, I'm a baby. But anyway, one other time was in college. I was sitting in a class, and all of a sudden, I'm like, I got to get out of here. Felt like I was suffocating. I'm like, okay, I think I'm going to die, and it was a test for a class that was not that difficult, okay? Yeah. But what I learned in reflecting on that was I had so much stress in my life that I wasn't dealing with it well. And I was a perfectionist, and that's another conversation we can have in the future. And when you're in a mode like that, or at least I was stressed that I wouldn't get the A. So I was really, really troubled, and I really just wanted to get out of there. Now I didn't, and I somehow talked myself down and calmed myself, and I finished that. So if anybody has panic attacks, I can understand that, but I hope that people will, and we'll talk more about how we as Christians can handle stress and along the same lines as panic attacks.
Oh, yeah. I hear you talk about dentists. It's funny that you say that. I was at the dentist and found out that I needed blood pressure medicine.
Oh, wow.
Because of anxiety, and the dentist wouldn't treat me until I got my blood pressure under control, because sitting in his chair just, like I said, sent me through the roof. I was like, whoo.
Yeah.
Yep, that's me every time I go to the doctor. They thought I had blood pressure problems because as soon as they'd take my blood pressure, it shot up so high. They're like, are you okay?
Yeah. Well, for me, any dental work I'd have to have done in the future, they wanted to sedate me.
Yeah, I've known people who needed that.
Yeah. And once again, we're not picking on dentists. They're great. It's just our experiences and what we were going through at that time. I wanted to also transition a little bit to the Bible. Now, what I love about the Bible is that there's so many examples that we can learn from in the Bible. And when we talk about anxiety and worry, there's a lot of examples. So I'm not going to go through all of them. I want to touch on a few, but I want to focus more on one. One of them is Job. Job, I know a lot of people bring this up, what he's gone through, what he experienced. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
And maybe there's people listening here that have lost loved ones, and we're sorry to hear that, and we're so sorry for your loss. And he lost a lot, and he also didn't have the greatest friends around him. So through his ordeal of losing his family, his children, and his health, he stayed true to God. And one of the examples or things I've learned from Job is just be careful who you have around you when you're going through difficult times, right?
Yeah.
Another one is Mary and Martha. Now, this is from Luke 10:38-42. It's where Jesus has come to visit, and Mary's busy in the kitchen, and Martha's sitting at his feet, and all of a sudden, Mary's just had enough. It's Joy's interpretation of this. Is she's had enough, and she goes in and tells Jesus, now, Jesus, don't you see, in so many words, Mary's not helping me, blah, 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 blah. And so she was having anxiety. She was obviously upset. And what did Jesus say? He said, Martha, Mary, in so many words, Mary made the better decision because what? She wasn't stressed. She was sitting. She was listening. At the feet of the Lord. To me, that's just so powerful.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that.
And I well, he says, cast all our cares upon him.
Yes.
And I think about that our focus, and I'm awful about remembering the scripture, but he says, look at the heavens. Look, where's our focus? Put our focus to him.
Right.
When those things are going on. And I think about, I've had to say it when things have come up and really given me stress. I'm like, God's not given me the spirit of fear, but the power of love and a sound mind.
I love that.
And I just repeat that to myself many times when I'm like, okay, just breathe.
Yep, there you go.
Just breathe and remember where my help comes from.
Right, that's good. That's
Yeah, that verse actually, I think it was 2 Timothy.
good. It's Timothy.
Right.
Yeah, that actually is a verse that someone gave me when I was about 15 years old. And I just repeat it to myself all the time because, especially being a teenager and having anxiety and things like that, you're afraid of everything, the future, tomorrow, yesterday. You're thinking about everything. So I think that verse is very helpful for anyone with anxiety.
That's really good because that age that you're mentioning is what predominantly people that age have a lot of anxiety.
Yeah.
So to hear what you're saying about what we were saying, the future, what other things were
It would
making you
be
anxious?
the future as well as just, I guess, the present and friend situations, or even just looking back and saying, wow, that was really stupid. Why didn't I say that instead? It was just like little things that my mind would pick on.
Right.
And you're very self-conscious too as a teenager. So there's a lot of things to think of and pick on at that age.
Yeah, I think about my daughter. She's a young adult now. And as a teenager, the peer pressure, the focus on self is huge when you're a teen. And you kind of hit the nail on the head when you're thinking about it all, trying to be the perfect person. And you don't know. There is no perfect person. There's just your perfect you.
Yeah, and I think you don't realize that, especially as a teenager, because you'll see older people, like adults in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and you think that they have their life together. But now that I am in my 20s, they did not have their life together. So I did not have anything to worry about.
Right.
Striving.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, it's the striving.
Right. And I think for me, growing up in the church, and I know, Kelsey, you have as well, and Beth, in those moments of being a young girl, because like I said, girls are twice as much impacted by anxiety than boys are. We have that identity going on as a young child or a young teen or even a teen, is that we want to be accepted. We want to think that we're beautiful. And so much in our society looks at the outward appearance. And at that age, we don't know much different. We're trying to just make sense of life at that time. I would encourage people to have their children actually in church, maybe like girls groups or teenagers in the youth group can help, and that they would open up to maybe their youth pastors or, their leaders of their classes. That helped me some during that time of growing up as well, that people took an interest in me and really made a difference.
Yeah.
As we know, the Bible is, has a lot for us as to learn from, and having people around us that know the Bible and can help us and give the scriptures, like you said, Kelsey, people who gave you that, and it really impacted you.
And, like you said, I think about that, well, just in reading, children between 13 and 18 experience anxiety 31% more now than they did before. And I think it's because times have changed and children don't have as many groups to go to. And I think if we have them in church, they have peer mentors. And because they don't most of the time, they're so busy looking at computers, looking at their phones, looking at games. They really do need someone to model themselves after.
I agree. Another one in the Bible is Paul and Silas in jail. They're in there and, falsely arrested. And they're in there, but I don't know if you guys remember or not, but they were singing praises to God. I'm sure they felt maybe a little stress. I don't know, but I think the thing I take away from that one is that they, through their circumstance, they look to God. Now, I know sometimes when we're going through things, we don't feel like praising God, but I'll tell you, when I have had some low times and when I'm going through anxiety and stress, I have actually prayed to God. And I always find for me that singing helps. Putting on music helps. It's just, it's like changes the mood and my focus. My focus changes from me to the Lord. Not to say that all my worries go away, but like you said, we're supposed to cast, Beth, that cast our worries away, to give everything to God. God never wanted us to take on the stresses of the world. He wanted us to and wants us to lay it at his feet, give it to him. Because worry actually, as I'm getting older, worry is not healthy. No. Actually can cause gray hair, and I certainly don't want more of that. And, other unhealthy things like your body. It affects your mind, which when your mind is affected, your body's affected as well. So to learn how to handle the stress, I don't know if you guys had any examples of how you handle stress or handled it that worked for you as well, that you can share with others.
Actually, music is something that definitely helped me a lot, especially listening to worship music, or even I am on worship teams. So even if I'm having a bad week or full of anxiety, just getting up there and praising God with others, it definitely helps you change your focus, because I think that is a big part of overcoming anxiety is changing what you're focused on. Right. You're going from focusing on, you're trying to focus on so many things at once and you really can't. Right. So I think that makes you more anxious as well. So focusing just on God and being in that moment, I think is one of the biggest helps that I've had.
That's good. Yeah.
I got to agree. Music is worship, praise. It makes you focus. It takes your eyes off of what you're going through, and it puts you in it puts you definitely in a different headspace where it's just sometimes you and God. Everything else just kind of goes away. And meditation is another thing for me. Getting in that quiet place and just maybe reading a scripture, doing a Bible study, anything other than what's going on in my head. Because I find sometimes I'm my own worst enemy. I can't get out of my head.
Right. Well, things I like, I'm an outdoors person, and I love to be in nature. I love to see the beauty. Now, moving to where we are now, there's not as much color as what I'm used to in another state, but I had to learn to see the beauty around me. I would walk through like the little areas that walk paths, and I would just try to get my mind into just worshiping God through nature, meaning, God, thank you for this beautiful day, what beautiful birds they are, because I'm an avid bird lover, as many know. And that calms me. So finding the things that ground us, that help us through, that is definitely something that I find comfort in, and it brings me peace. And I think that's the main thing people are wanting, right? Yeah. Peace through what they're going through.
Yeah, I think it's always nice to walk around and actually notice nature, because we just walk through it every day. And every once in a while, I'll just stop and think, wow, I know that's just a tree, but it's not just a tree. Like God created that tree. And I just think it's so cool and how it's so beautiful that it's just there doing its thing. And we just don't even notice it half the time.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, but my husband, his is birds. He
my kind of guy.
Yeah, he gets such pleasure out of just taking the time, listening to the birds. He'll go out on the porch and find his quiet place and just listen. And he's got a great sense of humor already, but
yes, he does.
To hear him, the way he talks about it, I'm like, he's so sensitive. I'm not giving him as much credit as he deserves.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
And you brought up getting with nature. I brought me back to thinking about something. I was having anxiety. When I left my job, I went back to school for a while. And after being out of high school for 28, almost 30 years and going back to school, another anxiety moment. Huge. I can remember my instructor. She's a little bit older than me, but she was a Christian. And she talked me down.
Oh, good.
She talked me off I want to quit. I don't want to do this anymore. And I was just a week into my program.
Oh, gee.
Yeah. And she really talked me down and gave me, actually, we prayed out in the hall.
Oh, wonderful.
And she's like, take the rest of the day, go. She goes, and I ended up at Robinson Preserve. I
love that place.
Took my Bible and just said, Lord, you lead this day.
That's good.
And he led me to Daniel.
I love Daniel.
And I was like, wow, there they are in the lion's den, just all of that stuff. And I'm like, that's how I felt. Those are my circumstances were horrible. And the Lord reminded me, hey, I'm here.
That's good.
I'm here. My presence is here. I'm here. Look at all around you. And I did. I just sat on a bench and read, cried.
Yeah.
Nobody else could hear me. Thank goodness.
That's good. That's a good way.
Yeah,
to
One of the things that when I went to counseling, grounding is a very important thing, but also something that I learned that you mentioned is that you were talked down and you just continued through. And I think one of the things that has helped me a lot with anxiety is to continue to do things even when you're feeling that anxiety.
That's good.
You just learn to keep pushing through, because I had a lot of anxiety as a teenager. I still have quite a bit of anxiety now, but I have learned since then to still do it even when I feel that fear.
Right.
That's good.
So I think that's one of the most important things I actually learned to do, because sometimes you can't just get rid of it. You
Right.
just have to learn to go through with it.
Right. That's good. That's really good.
And I think like you said, it just continue through. And when you continue through, it's like, it's not that big of a deal. You know, we build it up in our heads.
Yeah.
We give it more power than it deserves. And I think that's the enemy. He wants us to fail.
Yeah.
He wants us not to succeed. He wants us to change our focus. And when we power through and go on, I think that's where our breakthrough comes.
Yeah.
God, you know, he reminds us that God's in control. And see, I'm here. We got through it together. That's me.
Yeah, and that leads me right into the main Bible story I wanted to share, because it hits on a lot of what you guys are just talking about, and that's the storm on the Sea of Galilee. That is found in Mark 4:35 through 41. If you don't recall, let me give you a little example or a picture of what's going on there. You have the disciples in a boat, and Jesus is in the boat sleeping. And all of a sudden, the storm comes up, and they're all frantically trying to figure out what to do. And they're like, Jesus, how can you sleep through this? So he's still sleeping, and they're trying as best they can to kind of do whatever they can. And all of a sudden, Jesus wakes up, and he says, why are you so fearful? And Joyce, once again, I'm paraphrasing this. You can read this in Mark. And he calms the storm. And so it was a lesson that I've learned quite a bit, or recall and go back to quite a bit. And that is, the disciples were anxious, but Jesus was right there with them. And yet they were trying in their own might, because that's what they felt they had to do, was to go and fix it or figure out what to do. And it just ministers to me, and like, how many times do I do that? And then when I get back into the mode, like we were talking about, our focus back onto the Lord, that it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's Jesus was there. He calmed it. And it reminds me of a song. I don't know if you've ever heard it. It's called Sometimes He Calms the Storm. And we have it on our site as a video if you'd like to listen to it. But I want to read a part of that, because that always ministers to me when I listen to it and I realize, oh my. It says, sometimes he calms the storm with the whispered peace, be still. He can settle any sea, but it doesn't mean he will. Sometimes he holds us close and lets the winds and waves go by. Sometimes he calms the storm, and other times he calms his child.
Wow.
That always ministered to me, because like sometimes we feel, and others I've heard say, that as Christians everything should be perfect. When we accept the Lord, everything's nice, and we should have a perfect, peaceful life. That doesn't happen. What we have is we have Jesus. We have the Holy Spirit in us to help us through these situations. And sometimes when we are thinking outside, we're going and try to do things in our own strength, that we're to go to the Lord. Sometimes he wants to calm us and help us. All the time he wants to calm us. He wants to help us. And for me, an example in my life was I had a situation at a place I used to work, and I used to be so stressed out and anxious when I'd have to talk to somebody in particular, because I felt that they were demeaning and such. And so I would get myself all worked up, and then I would start praying, and the Lord would say, Joy, I'm bigger than this. You don't have to worry. I'm here. And it was just really enlightening to me, that situation, and this scripture verse and this example that the Bible has for us. And when we're feeling anxious and feel like there's nothing you can do and what to do.
Right. Well, you know, you talk about that, and I think about in Philippians chapter 4, it says, don't be anxious about anything.
Yep.
But in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in in Christ Jesus. And I think when that moment comes, it speaks to me. It says, where's your focus?
Right.
Change your mindset. I was kind of, when we started talking about anxiety, I found some things of Billy Graham, and I was like, wow, he was so prevalent. He's older than all of us, and I think about, he still had a lot of wisdom to impart.
Yes.
Even before he passed. There was a quote that I liked, and anxiety is the natural result when our hopes are centered in anything short of God and his will for us.
That's good.
It's like, okay,
That's really
get
good.
it.
That's really good. I have examples of some other Christians that people may or may not know in reference to worry. And Corrie ten Boom, I don't know if you've ever heard of her. She was a woman who survived the World War II concentration camps. And she said this. She said, worrying is carrying tomorrow's load with today's strength, carrying 2 days at one time. It is moving into tomorrow ahead of time. Worrying does not empty tomorrow of its sorrow. It empties today of its strength. That is so true.
Yeah. I think especially coming from someone who had plenty to worry about.
Right.
Yeah,
That
the
is
stress.
Right.
You're right.
definitely.
There's another person I wanted to share about, and that's Greg Laurie. He is a pastor in California. He says, we all have things to worry about in life. Worry can ruin your day. It can ruin your week. It can ruin your month. Actually, worry can ruin your life. He says, the word worry comes from a root word that means to choke or to strangle. Wow, that's an amazing picture. That's what worry does. It chokes you. When you worry about the future, you cripple yourself in the present. Jesus said, so don't be anxious about tomorrow. God will take care of your tomorrow too. Live one day at a time. In other words, take each worry and turn it into prayer. Those really ministered to me.
Right.
As a reminder, and will continue to when I try to handle things incorrectly with worry and anxiety. So what are some other ways that we can handle anxiety or worry? Any other things come to mind on how you handle that in your life?
I think, well, a lot of it is, for me, I just have to go back to where my help comes from.
That's good.
I have to remind myself, this isn't just about me. It's, I need to I need to change it's the focus. I need to look to the Lord. I go to the Word. I grab the Bible and say, okay, what are you trying to tell me here? Everything has a purpose. There's a purpose for this. Just what is it, God? Show me.
Right. I've learned to ask God, what are you trying to show me through this process? Because I think as Christians, sometimes we want to circumvent the lesson and get to the solution. We live in a generation that wants quick results. And as Christians, sometimes we walk through situations and we're growing and we're changing to be more like Christ. And sometimes we go through difficult times to get there.
Right. I think it's the valleys where we find out when we can stand.
Right.
When we're on the peak and everything's going great, okay, I'm on top of the world.
Yep.
But in that valley is really where the lesson comes in. And I have to remember this anxiety has a purpose.
Right.
Okay, Lord showed me what it is.
Right. I remember some dry times in my life and when I would be anxious for things. And a woman reminded me or gave an example that I'll never forget. She said, Joy, in the desert, with the cactus, there's no life there. It doesn't seem like there's life. The most beautiful flowers bloom. And I'm like, oh, who would have thought that situation, that something beautiful would come out of it? And maybe some people are going through some things now. You don't see beauty, but we want to encourage you to just lean into the Lord, rely on Him, go into a church or go to your church and, talk to people, get involved in small groups. Community is a good thing. Having relationships with people. Most importantly, having a relationship with Jesus Christ is the most important. I have found in my life as I grow more and more in the Lord, meaning I get closer to Him, I learn about His wisdom, I try to be more like Him, like loving and kind, that worry is not as impactful, or I am reminded when I start to worry or have anxiety to go to Him. It has helped. And one other thing is journaling. I'm a big proponent of journaling. I feel that is something that if you're going through some situations and you don't know what to do and you might be angry even when you're going through that. But I have found if you write it down, sometimes that helps because you're getting out what's inside of you, right? You're getting it on paper.
Yeah,
Right.
I think for me too, just thinking through what I'm feeling is not as helpful as writing it down. Because I've always been a writer in one aspect or another, whether it's poetry or writing short stories or journaling. But all of those experiences helped me because I would start writing things out. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know I was actually feeling that inside, because sometimes you don't identify how you're truly feeling about that moment until you're writing it down on paper.
Right.
Right. True. I go back, I'll write it down, and then when I read it, I'm like, oh, it just kind of hits me. Right. That's what I was feeling. I'll find a journal later on, like a year later, when I'm cleaning out the junk drawer, put my notebook away, and I'm reading, oh, I said that. Oh, I thought that.
That's cool.
Or this was going on, and then I'm thinking, well, God brought me through it.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's kind of a powerful thing to go, that did change. To look back and reflect, to have it in writing and see where God brought you to.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really nice. The nice thing about journaling.
I like being able to do that. I actually found some of my journals recently from back in my teenage years when I thought everything was the worst. I was never going to get through how I felt and my anxiety. And now just reading it, it's not that it like feels silly, but it kind of does that. The things I was worried about now, I'm like, well, you were fine, but you just didn't know that at the moment.
Right. Because you have no reference point. That's the thing about kids. When you say it's going to get better, they have nothing to relate that to because they're so young, right?
Right.
So to encourage them to, like the things we were saying, pray, go for a walk, whatever makes them happy. Some people, it might be art. Some people, it might be sports. Some it might be going to a basketball game. Whatever it is, to get your mind off that, to help you ease that. But also, don't forget to see that maybe God's trying to show you something in that, and that God will always be there for you. The word says that. He will never leave you. And I love that.
Right. I had a friend that she was our administrator, and she would say, well, grow where you're planted.
Like that.
And I didn't like it. Like, I don't want to just stay here. I don't want to, it made me feel stuck. But after I thought about it, grow where you're planted. I'm like, okay, I'll try. But I got it. It finally just sunk in, and, okay, Lord, if this is where I'm supposed to be right now, I'll go through it. I'll grow.
Right.
And
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, I think something that helps with anxiety for sure is just acceptance of where you are in that moment rather than trying to change it right there and then, because you're not going to be able to change your circumstances right there and then. You might not even have any control over what's going on in the situation. You just need to stay there, accept it, and know that God's beside you in that moment.
Right.
Yeah,
that's
that-
good.
be still and know that I'm God.
That's good.
But you hit something that control, anxiety and control. I think for this is just me personally. When I don't have control over a situation, that's where my anxiety comes.
That's good. Yeah.
And I'm like, and just to let it go, be like Elsa and let it go.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that. I think that's my biggest trigger for anxiety, not having control of the moment. Even back to being a kid, where the future was my biggest worry because I didn't have control over what my future is going to look like exactly. And it could be even something as simple as, oh, I'm about to be late. I can't control it all the time. I can't just get all the cars to move out of the way, get out of the traffic. So you just have to calm down there a little bit and say, hey, it's out of my control. But that is a tough thing to deal with for sure.
Yeah, that's an area I'm still working on, Kelsey. Thank you for bringing that up. No. Well, what about the people who have tried these things and it hasn't worked out exactly as they had hoped? What suggestions can we give them?
Well, I don't know if you want to call this a suggestion. I can just talk from personal experience.
Sure, be great.
Again, anxiety is lots of times situational. Sometimes there's just small anxious moments. Sometimes there's the huge moments like the loss of a loved one. I know when we lost our son to a suicide, I was doing all these things, but it just still, things kept going in the forefront of my mind that I couldn't get through. And I did seek medical help. They gave me a prescription, and it made it better. I will say it wasn't, again, it's situational.
Right.
Didn't take it all the time, but it got me through and gave me the time where I could seek God.
Right.
It changed my focus. So medication does help. I don't say that it's the first thing, but it helped me. It gave me what I needed to get to where I needed to be.
Right. Yeah, because a lot of people that I mentioned earlier in the podcast, some people think that we as Christians shouldn't go to get help and get medical attention or take medication, but I look at it again that God gave them the gift of coming up with those things to help get us through situations. So I agree with you, Beth.
Yes.
Medication is not a bad thing.
I have some personal experience with that as well, especially thinking I've done all these things and I still don't feel better. I've had a baseline of anxiety since I could remember. I would wake up as a child with panic attacks, and I didn't know what was happening at the time. I would just wake up out of sleep and be uncontrollably shaking. So I've had this since I was a child, and it just built and built and built as a teenager especially. And then once I hit college, it was at the worst that it had ever been. It went from being I could handle my day-to-day life to it just was not. I couldn't handle going to school and getting everything done that I needed to because I was just so anxious about everything. And that's when I started having full-blown panic attacks in college. And I had tried different things because I started to see a counselor as well. I tried exercise, eat healthier, pray, all of these different things. But finally, she did suggest that I go see a psychiatrist.
Okay.
And they did put me on medication. And for that time being, like you said, it really helps you kind of slow down your brain a little bit.
Right.
So you can actually focus on those things that people suggest that you do. Because sometimes when you're at that height, it's very hard for anything to truly get through. So I think professional help is a really good thing.
As for me, the medication, it allowed me to, like I said, slow things down. And okay, the spinning would stop.
Yeah.
The spiraling out of control would stop. And it's funny, I think about the medication and then gut health. It's silly, but we're the body as a whole. I looked at gut health. What I was eating, I changed my diet. And, just kind of really took it back to the healthy body, healthy mind.
They go hand in hand, don't
Yep.
they?
Yeah.
One affects the other.
I definitely am always a big proponent of having a healthy spiritual life, a healthy body, and healthy mind, having that whole holistic view. And I don't think that I always saw that when I was younger in the church and other situations in my life. So I really think it's important to emphasize each of those areas of your life need to be healthy because one can start to suffer.
Right.
You're right. And I actually, not just a professional medical prescription, I actually went all natural on some things that did help me. So everybody's body is different. So they have to find what works for them. So I appreciate you guys sharing what you have about your experiences and what has worked for you.
As we talk, even now, things come up at work and get anxious. But I found some YouTube things about sleep and how important sleep is to anxiety, stress, all of those things in our life. And I've been YouTubing sleep.
That's good.
Yeah, there was a guy, Matthew Walker. He's a expert in sleep and how to get to sleep, how to stay asleep. I said his stuff has really helped me because I struggle with the anxiety just before I go to bed. It's like my mind won't shut off. It's that constant overthinking, spinning, and someone led me to looking at sleep. He's like, he's a fitness counselor where I work, but he's like, let's fix your sleep first. I'm like, okay.
That's wonderful. Seeking help. That's great. We do want to mention, though, if anybody is in a abusive situation, we recommend that you get help. Seek help from other people because we don't want you to be in that type of environment that's not safe for you. So, guys, I think we have talked a lot about anxiety as far as what it is, how we've experienced it, what the Bible says, and some suggestions on what to do if people are feeling anxious. Once again, I just want to remind our listeners that we are not professionals here. We are just Christians who want to help other people. So if you are experiencing anxiety, extreme anxiety, we would suggest, you might want to seek out a medical professional. But we want to encourage you to do maybe some of the things we mentioned: pray, go for a walk, listen to some music, get involved in a small group at a church, and seek out support groups in other places, because we know that sometimes we need additional help from others. So thank you so much for listening today. If you want additional information about the topic we've discussed, you can go to our website at suicideloss.org/resources. That's suicideloss.org/resources. Thank you, Beth and Kelsey, and thank you, listeners, for joining in.
Thank you for listening. For more information, visit www.suicideloss.org. That's suicideloss.org. This presentation was not intended as a substitute for professional care. Please see a counselor or physician for your individual needs. Subscribe and like so that you never miss an episode.